So you decided to start sewing in 2026. Awesome! Now we need to get you geared up and get you ready for your sewing journey. Hi everyone, it's Julius here with you and welcome to my sewing channel. And a little bit about myself, I'm a self-taught sewist and my sewing journey started back in 2018, I think. And one thing that I realized over the years is that you can learn how to sew even without going to a formal sewing or design school. But wait, hold on. Of course you can go if you want a more structured way of learning. So it's really your choice, and not every one of us has that luxury. But as you're well aware, YouTube is filled with so many sewing channels and sewing tutorials that you can access anytime and learn at your own pace, like my channel. And pretty much that's what I did when I started sewing. And YouTube has become my biggest sewing resource, in addition to a couple of sewing books that I've acquired. So if I can do it, so can you. Since you clicked on this video, I'm guessing you're planning to start sewing, but want to know which tools you'll need to get started. So let me break it down for you. The sewing tools and notions I'm about to share are the ones I started with, and they've been incredibly useful to me from day one. Realistically, you don't need the fanciest sewing tools and notions to learn how to sew or to make amazing garments. And more often than not, simple tools are all you need, and they can even be more effective at getting the job done. Naturally, the first item is a sewing machine, the main tool you'll use for sewing garments and just about any project. Sewing machines generally come in two types, mechanical and computerized. I suppose it's also helpful for you to understand the distinction. Mechanical sewing machines are usually more affordable than computerized ones. They are simple and easy to use, making them great for beginners. They are a more traditional type of sewing machine that's operated mainly with manual controls. You use dials, knobs, and levers to adjust settings like stitch type, stitch length, and tension. It doesn't really rely on digital screens or programmed stitch menus. Because of its simplicity, it's often easier to repair and usually more budget-friendly. And I myself started with a mechanical sewing machine. On the other hand, computerized sewing machines use electric components and a built-in computer system to control stitching. Instead of turning dials, you select stitches using buttons or a touch screen in most machines nowadays. They often come with a wide variety of built-in stitches, automatic settings like thread cutting or needle positioning, and more precise control, which makes them more versatile but also more expensive. My advice is to start with a mechanical sewing machine if you're a beginner. It lets you get a feel for sewing and see how you like it before investing in a far more expensive model. This machine that I have here is a Brother X14S mechanical sewing machine. But I wouldn't say that this is an entry-level machine, as it has those essential functions you would typically need in garment sewing. So when choosing one, just make sure that the machine also has a zigzag stitch, a buttonhole stitch, and a stitch width adjustment. These are all the functions that you will need to be able to sew a garment. I mean, on top of the straight stitch, of course. I cannot recommend any other sewing machine, as I have been using mostly Brother sewing machines ever since I started. And truthfully, they're very reliable, and the quality of the machine that you can get is really worth your money, regardless of the machine type and budget. But do as you will. If someone else recommended a different machine, of course you can try that out. But generally speaking, they all do the same mechanism, and it is to create stitches and sew two pieces of fabric together. Now, for the rest of the sewing tools and notions I will mention, I've grouped them into two categories: the pattern making tools and the sewing notions. As a beginner, you'll usually need some basic understanding of pattern making, since it forms the foundation of creating well-fitting garments and sewing projects. Let's go over the pattern making tools first. You will need to have a set of measuring tools just like these ones. A sewing room almost always has a measuring tape. This is actually one of the most essential tools in sewing. Given its flexibility, this allows you to take body measurements as it can easily wrap around your body, measure fabric, and check pattern dimensions. So this is going to be one of your most essential tools throughout your sewing journey. And I always keep 2 of these in my sewing room because for some reason, one always goes missing right when I need to measure something mid-project. You will also need just 3 rulers, in my opinion. The first one is an L square or set square, which is shaped like the letter L. This allows you to draw perfectly straight 90-degree angles. This is a precision tool that helps you make sure your patterns are accurate and properly shaped, especially when drafting or adjusting garments. This one that I have here is very old. I've had this since I started sewing, I think. And up until to this day, it's serving its purpose really well. This one right here is a French curve. This is used to draw smooth, flowing curves that you can't easily create with a straight ruler. You would typically use this in shaping necklines, armholes, crotch curves, as well as waist and hip curves. In simple terms, it helps you turn straight pattern lines into smooth, natural-looking curves for better fitting and for more professional-looking sewing patterns. And I love using this specific French curve because it's clear and sturdy, and I believe it's made of acrylic, and it's a good size for drawing long, smooth curves. French curves come in a variety of sizes. You can find small ones or even bigger ones than this, but they all do the same job, and it is to make smooth, natural-looking curves. Now, if you're confident with freehand drawing, you might not need this, but in my opinion, it's still a great tool to have in your sewing room, especially in your pattern-making journey. Last one on the rulers list is this flexible, clear gridded ruler. This is a 12-inch ruler with grids of 1/8-inch increments. This is great for pattern making and grading. I always use this to add seam allowances to my sewing patterns. Now, if you're still unfamiliar with how garment sewing works and what's a seam allowance, technically in sewing, a little bit of fabric disappears when they're sewn together, and that's what's called a seam allowance, and every sewing pattern requires one. Whether it be a garment or a bag or a quilt, anything that needs to be sewn together needs a seam allowance. And adding seam allowances, at least for me, should always be done during the pattern making process. It makes the sewing process so much easier, and this ruler is what helps make that possible. Then we have the tracing wheel. If your goal is to copy your existing garments, this is a very helpful tool to have in your sewing room. This is basically used to transfer markings from pattern onto fabric using carbon paper, or to trace the outline of your existing garment directly onto your pattern paper. You would notice that it has these pointed spikes that rotate like a wheel. By rolling it over the pattern, it leaves an imprint, either directly onto the fabric or through tracing paper. So you can copy the lines like darts, seam lines, or notches accurately. This one is pretty cheap, and I recommend you get something sturdy like this one. I don't really know what the brand is, but any sturdy tracing wheel will work. Next up on our pattern making tools are these fabric markers and chalk. Now, you wouldn't use this in drafting or making your pattern papers. They are just simply used to transfer markings from your pattern papers onto fabric, similar to a tracing wheel. But they're used mostly for accurate and precise transferring of markings, such as pocket placements, buttonhole placements, darts, or even cutting lines. I would recommend getting 3 different colored fabric markers like these. These are water-soluble, which means the markings can be washed very easily with water. You can also get one of these heat-erasable pens that I have if you like. They're also useful for transferring markings, and the lines usually disappear easily with the heat from an iron. Highly recommended as well. Then we have chalk. This is just a plain white piece of chalk, also called tailor's chalk. This is great for drawing outlines directly onto your fabric. All these pattern making tools are very affordable and are essential in pattern making. And for me, these are all what you need to be able to make beautiful sewing patterns. I'm not gonna mention what kind of pencil to use. You can use any pencil that you have, or what kind of pattern paper you should go for. Any paper will do as long as it's wide enough to accommodate your body size. You can use tracing papers, gift wrappers, butcher papers, anything of the sort. Now on to the other sewing tools and notions. These are my go-to tools that make my sewing process more efficient and practical. And the best thing is they're affordable and are available in every sewing supply store. And I have a rule that I would never buy anything fancy just because everybody's recommending it or that tool is currently trending in the sewing world. I'm more simplistic and practical. Cutting tools. I have 3 different cutting tools right here. Obviously, you will need this to either cut your fabric or your sewing threads. We have 2 types of scissors right here, and this small one is a snipping tool. The first one from these is a pair of fabric shears or scissors. Never use your kitchen scissors or your crafting scissors on your fabric. Otherwise, you will end up with fabric pieces with a lot of fraying edges. And also, they're not meant to cut fabric. Get a fabric scissors and label it if you want so you don't use it for anything else aside from fabric. And of course, your paper scissors. This is very straightforward. You just need to get any crafting or paper scissors just to cut your paper patterns. And I know you've heard this a million times, cutting paper with your fabric scissors makes it dull. Which is true. Been there, done that. Then you will need a snipper or a thread trimmer. This is very handy for snipping thread tails. So instead of cutting your thread tails as soon as they come out of the sewing machine with a pair of scissors, use this. You can easily cut loose threads very closely without risking cutting through your garment. I've accidentally snipped my finger with one of these. These are super sharp, so be careful. I normally keep this in close proximity to my sewing machine because they always come in very handy when I'm rethreading my sewing machine as well as my serger or overlocker machine. So there's our cutting tools, super affordable and they can get the job done. Let's move on to sewing pins. Basically, these are pins used in sewing to hold fabric pieces together so they don't shift when you're sewing or when you're moving the fabric pieces from your cutting table to your sewing machine. I have 2 types of sewing pins right here. Both of these have glass head balls. They have a small glass ball at the top instead of a plastic head. You know, the round things that you grab on when you're handling the pins. The glass head balls are actually heat resistant and won't melt if you briefly press them with an iron. But I wouldn't recommend pressing or ironing your fabric with the sewing pins in. It's just not a good habit, at least for me. You would notice I have 2 sets of sewing pins right here. These ones are very thin sewing pins which I use mainly for finer fabrics or sheer fabrics like silk, crepe, chiffons, or anything similar. And the other one, these colored head pins, are a little bit thicker, which I mainly use for medium to heavyweight fabrics. And really, I would recommend that you get 2 kinds or 2 different thicknesses. Also, it's a great idea to get a wrist pin cushion like this. You can just put it on whenever you're sewing. It makes pinning and removing pins much easier. Also, it prevents you from losing and dropping your sewing pins everywhere. Or you can get this magnetic sewing pins holder. As the name implies, it has a magnet inside that holds the pins really well and again, prevents you from losing or dropping your pins. It's also great for picking up any pins that fall on the floor. The magnet will just suck the pins right back in. Alright, so last 3 sewing notions on my list. As a beginner, you might make a lot of mistakes, especially with the stitching on your garments or projects. And this tool can help you undo those mistakes. This one is called a seam ripper, another important tool in sewing. What it does is primarily to rip stitches apart. It has a pointed tip that you slide under the stitches and it has this sharp curved blade that cuts through the thread when you lift it. Basically, it helps you remove stitches neatly without damaging the fabric. Not only this is used to undo stitching mistakes, this is also a tool in opening up buttonholes. You don't necessarily have to buy one because most sewing machines come with a seam ripper included. I just bought this separately because I find that the tip on this is way thinner than the one I got with my sewing machine. You will also want a loop turner if you're going to be making a lot of dresses with straps. So this one right here is, as I've mentioned, is a loop turner. It has a long, thin metal shaft with a small hook or latch on one end that grabs the fabric and pulls it through. And on the other end is a circular handle. This is where you will hold on to pull and turn the fabric or a tube piece of fabric right side out. This is very easy to use and very inexpensive. And like I said, if you're going to be making a lot of straps or belt loops or anything narrow you have to deal with, this is your tool. And lastly, a seam gauge. This is very optional, however, I find that this is most useful, especially for measuring seam allowances, hems, pleats, and spacing between stitches, helping to keep everything consistent and accurate. I didn't include this in the measuring or pattern making tools category because I don't use this in pattern making. I mainly use this during the sewing or construction process. This one is 7 inches long and it has a sliding marker or a gauge, that's why it's called a seam gauge, that you can set to a specific measurement. So whenever you need to turn in and press your hems, this is a great tool to use. Also, I would use this to mark the distance of my buttonholes. Another thing that you'll notice is that it has a pointed end because this is not only a seam gauge, but it is also a point turner. This is used to shape and sharpen corners after turning a sewn piece right side out. It helps you push out points like collar tips, cuffs, or corners so they look crisp and well-defined without damaging the fabric. I love using this tool, and as you can see, it's small and easy to handle without interfering so much with my sewing. So there you have it, friends, my top sewing tools and notions for every beginner sewer out there. They may look very basic, but trust me, they can help you get any sewing job done without compromising the quality of your garments or projects. I want to thank you for watching this video. Drop your questions in the comment section if you have any, and please don't forget to like and subscribe for more sewing content. See you on the next one.